Welcome to Vaquera Studios, where we're imagining a more gentle world. I'm so excited to share with you my thoughts on all things self-care, mindful moments, and stories of my life in the desert. I'm your host, Olivia Rodriguez Mendez. In today's solo episode, I'll be sharing my personal self-care journey and what you can expect from this podcast. Hi friends, before we dive into today's episode, I have some exciting news to share. To celebrate the launch of Vaquera Studios and all things self-care, I've partnered with Earth Mama Organics for an amazing giveaway. One lucky US winner will get to pick their own bestseller bundle from Earth Mama Organics. Their bundles include incredible options like the baby starter kit, sunscreen sets, and breastfeeding bundles, and more. Check out the details on how to enter over on my Instagram at Vaquera Studios. I've loved Earth Mama Organics since my first pregnancy, and their clean herbal products are for everyone, not just moms. Some of my favorites are the nipple butter, lip balms, and my newest obsession has been their tinted mineral sunscreens. I've added a link in the description to explore their bundles. You're going to love them. Don't wait too long. This giveaway ends this Friday, January 3rd, so enter now. Let's celebrate self-care together, and good luck. Okay, so where do I start with my self-care journey? Let me set the scene. So we're in the Eastern Coachella Valley. I am the daughter of farm-working parents. And for the most part in the Eastern Coachella Valley, a lot of the community does work in hard, intensive labor. So from a young age, that's one thing that I took away just from my family. And when I reflect on my community, I do think of a strong and beautiful and resilient community, but also a community that sacrificed so much. That resiliency, that strength has come at a cost. So for example, I would see my parents, right? Like when they were sick or not feeling well, it didn't mean, they could call off of work, they could have a sick day. Like, no, it just meant they had to push through it because, they are not only financially sustaining like our household, like they're also supporting their families in Mexico and have been doing that for years since they were children. So like self-care wasn't like a term that was used in my household. I didn't know about like what mental health services look like, and I will say that despite all of this, my mom was still very vocal about like, hey, make sure to rest. If you're tired, if you don't feel well, it's okay to rest. So I do want to say that, now, like looking back as a mom now, that was so important for me to hear. And I'm happy she vocalized that, because again, what I saw was just them just sacrificing so much all of the time. And I'm going to fast forward to when I was in college at UC Berkeley, just because that was a moment in my life where I was experiencing a lot of stressful situations all at once. I mean, apart from being a first generation Mexican American student at a campus, there was also things happening at home that were just really stressful. I didn't have any healthy coping techniques or practices that I had at the time, so that moment in my life was definitely really stressful. I didn't know how to manage my stress. I kind of just like kept pushing through. I didn't really understand the resources that were available to me to like reach out. Like, who do I reach out to and talk about this? Or I think I just kind of have to figure it out on my own. That's kind of where my mindset was at. And since I was on a pre-med track in college, I was in a lot of like health clubs. And I was hearing for the first time from like guest speakers in those spaces that were mental health professionals talking about mental health and talking about stress and all of these things. And it was just so new to me to be a part of those conversations, that I was just kind of like, wow, this is really important. But at the time, I didn't understand how important it really was to like my health and my own well-being, that I kind of just put it at the back of my mind, like, oh, well, I don't have time for this type of situation. Like, oh, well, I don't have time for this, like I just wasn't valuing and prioritizing my well-being at the time. I didn't know how to make time for self-care. I didn't know how to make time to reach out to like resources on campus to learn how to be able to manage my stress better or anything like that. But those moments of curiosity and wanting to learn more were definitely there. And I did some reflection at this time of like, what were those tools that I did have that where I did get support to get through it, like just day-to-day things, And I came to realization that for me, growing up in the Eastern Coachella Valley, since it is kind of like a rural community, for me, I didn't have access to like a lot of spaces necessarily. Like I couldn't just walk to the park. Like that, like to move around and to like get to like clinics or parks or things like that, you really need to have like a car or a ride or something like that. Like even walking to the bus stop, the school bus stop, or like the public transportation, it was like a mile walk to get there. And when it's summertime and the temperature is like 120 degrees or higher, a walk's just not it. What I did realize is that for me, some of the most significant and impactful moments were spaces that I did have access to. So in high school, for me, like basketball was such an important part of my life. Through basketball, through movement, I was able to vent out like a lot of the feelings that I did have growing up that I wasn't able to like voice in my house because of a lot of reasons, like just because those conversations around mental health are not normalized necessarily in my family, or there was always a lot of people in my house, which I think was really beautiful. I have a lot of like family who are migrant farm workers. Our house was always open to family, right? And I'm an introvert, so I just always kept things in. I didn't also want to like burden my parents. I'm like, they already like have a lot going on. They're working from like sun up to sundown, and I don't want them to worry. I think that was the thing, right? I didn't want to like just vent out and have them worry about me. Just like everyday things that you go through growing up that like got me upset, or that I was like stressing out about. And I was also like a really angry kid, and I think a lot because of like, well, I don't like that my parents are working so hard, and it's like a lot of the working conditions are so just intense. I had a lot of like anger, and a lot of feelings that I needed to process. And for me, movement became a sacred space for me, that I would just like, through movement, through that sweat, I would just like feel so good after a practice. And I gotta say, like, shout out to my coaches. I had like amazing coaches. But like what we essentially did on once a week, we had essentially circles. Where we would just talk about what's happening, like our coach would always kind of like tell us like, yeah, we can, like, it's not just about like physically practicing and things like that. Like, of course that's important, but also like our how are we doing mentally, like that's really important, and it's gonna impact the way that you show up, not just like to play, but like in your everyday life. And let me tell you, like the team do a lot of healing collectively through those circles, but personally, like that has just always stayed with me. And of course community, like I think in the Eastern Coachella Valley, I saw my culture reflected back a lot. So going to UC Berkeley, like my first year, and having that, like my culture like visibly, like I didn't see it as much, was like, wait a minute, like that was the first time I've ever been in that situation. And that's when I realized like community is really important for me, safe spaces are really important for me, and movement's really important for me. So how can I make time for it? And I was trying my best in college, but for example, one year I remember I just needed like zero point 0.5 units to complete my enrollment or something like that. And I was like, well, I don't want to take another class. Like I already have like a good workload that I don't want to add more necessarily, because I'm like working, I'm volunteering, I'm doing all these things. I don't want to add like a whole nother class. So I added a PE class. I forgot what it was called, but essentially I added like a basketball class where it was like zero point 0.5 credits. And I made, so like that forced me to like make time for basketball a few times out of the week, which was amazing. I feel like that was one of the semesters where I was like, this is working. And so when I wasn't able to do that, I would always try to schedule like at least time to join intramural like basketball. Like having this movement as part of my life is essential to my well-being. And then I'm gonna do another time jump. So now I'm back at home after I graduated college. I wanted to come back to the Eastern Coachella Valley. I wanted to work here. I heard a lot about public health in college, but I was just like, okay, I'm hearing about it a lot in the classroom. What does that actually look like in community? And there was a lot of things happening here in the community that I was just so excited to reconnect. And I will say that was probably like around the time where I did start hearing about like self-care. It was more like, to be honest, in a like here's what you need to buy for self-care, or like things like that. And like that's cool and all. I'm not saying not to buy those things if they make y'all happy, if they bring you joy. Like that can also be a part of like your self-care journey. And then I was just kind of like looking for more. I was having like conflicting like reflection points where I was just kind of like, yeah, I think this self-care is so important, but when I would look for like content, if you will, on social media, or when it would just spring up, I'm like, but there's always like this like, I don't think I need to be purchasing anything necessarily like to practice self-care. And I would see, of course, lists, right, of just like things that you can do to practice self-care that are accessible, right, like journaling or meditating or singing or things, different things like that. And I was just kind of like, why do I have this like in a way like guilt when I think about self-care? Like, why is that? And it was bugging me so much until I was kind of like I started like learning and hearing more about like self-care as a radical act. And I'm gonna go ahead and read Audre Lorde's quote. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And I think this really spoke to me. My feelings that I had as a child, all that anger that I was holding on to and things like that, I was like, yes, like this is it. It's like self-care is a radical act. Like society does not like to see black and brown bodies resting. And I think that kind of empowered me to like really reflect and take my self-care journey seriously. I realized that it was like that same guilt that I had when like I would ask for a day off, like, hey, let me practice, and I would kind of feel guilty. I'm just like, oh, like I asked for a day off. I'm not because I feel sick. Like by all rights, I should be able to have that day off, but like it just kind of like just that subconscious kind of conditioning that I had growing up of like working on like just working and sacrifice and all that. It's still something that I deal with today, that I've gotten like better at. But I remember like when I was starting to practice that in workspaces, I would feel guilty like asking for the day off, or I'd kind of just be like oh my goodness, like what are my parents gonna think, or things like that. But those conversations need to be normalized. Like it's okay to ask for a sick day because you're sick, and it's okay to ask for a day off because you're not feeling well, because you need a mental health day. It's okay. And so that's where I'm at today. And I will say I'm a mom of two little boys. My pregnancy transformed my self-care journey, my relationship to myself and my body, and the way that I showed myself love. It was for the first time in my life during my first pregnancy where I was like intentionally showing myself love, like in a way that I'd never done before. Like just the act of like rubbing my belly, being more gentle with my body and the way that I moved. I was like, no, let's take a gentle walk. I want to walk slow. And as I was connecting with my baby, just saying like loving kind words, I was saying it to my body too, and that was like the first time I've ever done that. It had never like just occurred to me like to do that to myself like in all of my life. And that act in itself just like transformed the way that I viewed myself. And I was like, why am I not doing this the other days that I'm not pregnant, right? Like, why am I just doing this now? Like, it totally like changed the game for me in terms of self-care. And now as a mom of two little boys, I want to continue like practicing that and normalizing self-care. I want them to be in tune with themselves, right? Not just with their body, but like also mentally and spiritually. And I think it's so important as they get older to like have those conversations with them, but also to just like practice self-care so that they can see that that's normalized in our household. So yeah, that's kind of like my self-care journey. Part of me is still angry, like self-care is not accessible a lot of the times because of like many different reasons. But I definitely encourage you to like reflect on your self-care journey. That's definitely helped me out to like at least be mindful of just because it always kind of like, not gonna lie, it's kind of like sucks that you're like, okay, what do I have time for now? Like that's where I'm kind of at, where I'm just like, I want to be more proactive with my self-care. And I found some things that work, some things that don't. I think navigating self-care as a mom now, it's totally different too. But I think for me, a lot of the things that have been shifting is like I need to plan for self-care, just because sometimes I'm in a moment of like chaos, of good chaos, that the week just flies by and I'm like, how did we get here? But yeah, I would definitely love to hear any reflections that you might have of your own self-care journey. So how did we get here? How did we get to Vaquera Studios? I will say that I am still figuring out my own self-care journey. I feel like it's something that I'm always going to be practicing and exploring and reflecting on as the world changes. And part of my dreams from this podcast do come from that little angry girl of just wanting to see her parents rest. And I really do believe that when we tap into self-care, we're able to access some of the most beautiful parts of ourselves, some of the most powerful parts of ourselves. And I want to explore what that looks like and how can that transform those around us. So this is what you can expect from Vaquera Studios. Definitely more solo episodes where I'll be sharing about my personal self-care journey and just mindful moments of my life in the desert. And I do have future plans of inviting some guests, having some mini interviews, and where we just talk about all things self-care. I would also love to hear your thoughts on what you'd like to see on this podcast. And I do want to close this off by introducing a segment called Reflections. So in this segment, I really want to make time to share self-care practices. So if you have any that you're currently loving, that you're currently practicing, comment them. I would really love to share them in the next episode. For today, I'll be sharing a self-care practices that I've been loving, and that has everything to do with my hair. So for all of my life, except like 2 moments, I have always had a long hair and I love having long hair. Mind you, I'm about to chop it off in the next month. But one of my favorite self-care practices, just to spend time on my hair. It's so soothing. It's so relaxing. But I think right now where I'm in that part in postpartum where it's just falling out a lot. And I always get like anxiety because I'm finding my hair, and it's super long now. So I'm finding like just long pieces of hair everywhere. And sometimes like my baby will have them like, you know, like in his little fist. And oh my god, that anxiety. That's one of the reasons I'm chopping it off. But since I know the day's coming, I've been spending time like just braiding it. It's the best of both worlds. I braid it, and yes, it does fall, but not as much because you know it's in a braid throughout the day. But I've just been playing with ribbons with on my hair, and it's been like the best thing. And not only is it like a fast hairdo that I'm able to do, but it's also like cute, just adding ribbon, just adding color. Just been really loving that practice. It's like my self-care time that I have to myself, and it's also been just so sweet knowing that like I have an appointment in January. I think it's just making it more meaningful, if that makes sense. Like I could keep talking about my hair. Maybe there'll be an episode on my hair, just because it really does means so much to me having long hair. It's a part of who I am. I just love long hair. What can I say? If you're still here, just thank you so much for tuning in to the first episode of Vaquera Studios. As a reminder, please subscribe and leave a comment below. Your thoughts mean the world to me, and I would love to hear all your self-care thoughts. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye. Dude, watch me record an episode without audio on. Dude, watch me forget to press record. I'm your host.